Hello. That's okay. We're going to give a couple more minutes, but in the meantime, we can start talking. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Texas Language Center, Dr. Garza could not be here today, so I'm presenting on his behalf. My name is Paola Boucher, and I'm the Senior Program Coordinator of the Texas Language Center. First, I want to let you all know about a couple of the upcoming events that we are sponsoring. November 5th, we have another Language Matters, Japanese AI conversational chatbots with Professor Duffy. Please do come in and sign up for the lunch early. On November 19th, we have the task of the Sanskrit translator during International Education Week. And November 20th, integrating the arts into language curriculum. The information is passed around in a little sheet of paper, but also it's all in our website for all the information. So if you have signed up for our lunch, please take your lunchbox. And without any further ado, I will introduce our presenter today. Dr. Morgane Haesen, a native of Belgium, is an assistant professor of instruction in French. Before joining UT Austin, she was an assistant professor of French at High Point University in North Carolina. In 2022, she received her PhD in French from the Pennsylvania State University, where she served as curriculum developer for the implementation of new textbook series, as well as the coordinator for the Summer Language Institute. Furthering her interest in second language pedagogy, Professor Haesen has since piloted and presented on ungrading course models, developed and mentored digital humanities projects for undergraduate research, and received training in service learning curricula. At UT Austin, Professor Haesen currently leads a team of colleagues, graduate and undergraduate student assistants to update the French language online textbook Français Interactive. She is likewise working on a 19th century women writers in the Francophone world database, which will be published in fall 2025, sometime, right? She holds several assessment and consultant positions with the International Baccalaureate Organization and the College Board, among others. As a cultural historian, Professor Haesen also studies life writings and published diaries, correspondence, and memoirs found in archives and written by ordinary people in Francophone borderland spaces, including Alsace-Lorraine during the First World War, Castroville, Texas in the mid-19th century, and Oran, Algeria in the earlier 20th century. So please welcome Dr. Morgane.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction. So yes, my name is Morgane Haesen. I've been teaching at the university level for about 10 years now at 3 different institutions. And I've been piloting AI activities for the last 2. And so today I'm here to talk to you about the here and now of AI in language teaching. I've got some examples, resources, and research for you all. So thank you for coming and welcome. This is a modified version of the presentation I already gave at the American Association of Teachers of French in July in Chicago, a trip generously funded by the Department of French and Italian, as well as the Texas Language Center. So thank you very much for that support. And so today the plan is, there we go, to first explain to you the digital humanities framework with which I use AI. The bulk of the presentation will be concrete examples in teaching and learning. And then I'll share with you some recent research and then UT-specific resources for you all. And hopefully we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So AI, where to start? Let's begin in November 2022 when OpenAI published its website ChatGPT. And of course, since then, AI has taken off. And since then, we've come to know websites such as Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, even IBM Watson. And slowly but surely, we've come to understand that generative AI describes algorithms that can autonomously create new content, including audio, code, images, text, simulations, and videos. And so we have these tools at our disposal. We've had them for about 3 years now. The question is, how do we meaningfully use them in our work? And this is a question that I asked myself in spring 2023 when I decided to implement AI in my teaching at my previous institution. Now, I knew that I needed a deliberate and consistent framework to apply for this AI usage, because we know that students learn best and assessment works best when education is purposeful, integrated, and ideally even collaborative, right? So I knew I had to set up a framework that taught students the when of AI usage. When are we going to use it, in which, for which type of activities versus when are we not going to use it. I knew I had to teach how. So AI, we ask it to perform tasks and we get results. To get the best results, students need to write meaningful and purposeful instructions. And I also, and this is probably the most important, I had to teach students why. The why behind for it. Why this activity, why not this activity? Why are we using it in such a way and not in another way? In other words, I knew I needed to establish rigor, transparency, even expectations. And by setting up that framework, I could get around this policing state that we all seem to be in with AI, at least at the beginning. So in search of a framework, I decided to draw on my previous knowledge of digital humanities. Now, digital humanities, it's an academic field of research that merges the quantitative with the qualitative. It's been around for a while. It's quite an established field. It's been around since the 1990s. It's mostly known for large digitization projects. And slowly but surely, it's evolved in pedagogy to be a skill set to teach students, as well as a tool with which to teach. Here's some books for your later reference if you're interested in DH pedagogy. And so I've been quite versed in this field of DH, digital humanities. I'm actually still working on DH projects. Like Paola mentioned, I'm about to publish a website. It's actually a crowdsourced database of 19th century women writers in the French-speaking world. So I'm quite well versed in this. And so when I was in search of a framework 2 years ago to implement AI, I went back to this framework and the tenets of DH. So when we are teaching with digital humanities, we want to make sure that whatever students are using is accessible. Ideally free, online, no download is required. It's got to be private, especially when it comes to student grades, right? Think FERPA. And it's got to be user-friendly. Again, no download, but no extra accounts needed as well. In addition to that, whatever we are having students use, it's got to be innovative, and this is the heart of it. We want to make sure that it cannot be realistically explored or taught another way. In other words, we're enhancing teaching, we're not replacing teaching. You also want to make sure that your students are actively engaged in this process. We do not want passive consumers of technology. This is where we go into the offloading, mental offloading realm of AI. And finally, whatever you're using to teach with, you want to make sure that as an instructor, it's productive for you. It's saving you time, it's saving you effort. So those are that's the basic framework here of DH pedagogy that I then apply to AI usage. Now, just to give you an example here, or two examples specifically, of DH pedagogy that I've done in the past. Text analysis is quite easy to do with DH. So in this project, students selected a pretty big corpus of newspaper articles in French. They fed them through this program called AntCon, and they were able to do text analysis on a large scale, looking at clusters of words and the context in which specific words appear. In addition to that, I've brought students to virtual reality labs. These pictures are from Penn State in spring 2022. This was an upper division culture class, and we studied the cultural reforms of the François Mitterrand French presidency through the lens of Parisian architecture. So again, cannot be realistically explored or taught another way. It's much better to experience space than to read about it, even if we're not in France. All right, so we're going to take this framework and these tenets and then apply it to our teaching. It's important to consider your specific teaching circumstances. And I'll get to that in a little bit. You want to make sure that whatever you're using is accessible. Now, for everyone in the room here, this is going to look extremely similar because we all have access to the same AI UT tools. And those are, it's a suite of 3, Microsoft Copilot, UT Spark, and UT Sage. And all 3 are accessible, meaning that they're free, they're online, no account, additional account is required. No download is required. And in addition to that, they're all FERPA compliant, as long as you and your students are logged in with your EID. So we have this suite accessible to us. I should also mention they're all chatbots, right? So we're speaking to a bot. The first two are very open-ended, meaning that like ChatGPT, you can ask it to perform a wide array of tasks. UT Sage is a bit different. This is actually a chatbot that you as faculty or staff, you create, you train, and then you assign to your students. And I'll show you an example of what that can look like. All right, so we've applied the accessibility tenet. Let's look at innovation. This is where in this room we're probably all going to differ. What's going to be innovative in your teaching circumstances will not be innovative in someone else's. So in my case, I mostly teach first and second semester French language courses. Our classes are intensive 6-credit classes, but we only meet twice a week. And in addition to that, we employ a communicative and flipped classroom approach. So for me, innovation for these classes is being strategic with my at-home versus in-class use of time. I want to make sure that whatever's happening at home, it's the explicit grammar, it's the memorization, and then once students come to class, we apply that in communicative activities at the sentence level, at the paragraph level, at the dialogue level. So that's strategic for me, that's innovative for me. In addition to that, these lower division classes tend to be very top-down, right? So I want to make sure that those students who always go above and beyond, we always have a few students who are doing Duolingo, who watch their favorite series in the target language. We want to make sure that we're giving those students some agency and opportunity to merge what they've learned outside the scope of your class with your class. So those are the two innovative tasks that I'm targeting. In addition to that, you want to make sure that your students are prepared to use these AI activities. So what I suggest, this can take many shapes and forms. What I suggest is assigning an AI literacy introductory module on Canvas, maybe the first or second week of classes. And you want to make sure you hit 4 main points: the when, how, and why of AI usage. So again, what does access look like and innovation look like to you? In addition to that, this should be a syllabus statement. Better yet, you could actually create that statement and policy with your students and have that 30-minute discussion of the when, how, and why with your students. Second, you want to make sure that students are aware of the environmental costs and impacts of AI usage. This is, of course, not negligible in today's day and age. You could assign to them an article about Texas data centers, about UT-specific environmental initiatives, student groups, for example. A lot of MIT studies have come out to explain the specific concrete energy usage of AI. What does a text inquiry represent in terms of like charging up your phone or even an image generation? In addition to that, your students should know how to effectively and productively write a prompt. This is a skill set that they'll need not just in our classes, but well beyond. So you could assign a chapter to read, for example, in an AI learning book. And then finally, you should teach students the limitations of AI, so nuances that are lost, and especially bias. And for these last 2 points, I'll have some concrete examples for you all at the end of today's presentation. All right, we figured out what innovation looks like to us. We've prepared our students. Here are 5 examples of student activities you could do in your classes. The first one is going to be inductive, scaffolded, and contextualized learning. So the idea here is to have students use a chatbot to learn a grammatical concept. So students are going to be first introduced to this grammar concept in context, and I'm going to use possessive determiners as my example today. So here's the scene. A few minutes before class, students start walking into the room. I give them the handout for the day. It's got this excerpt of the poem Paul Éluard. Liberté. Maybe the musical adaptation is playing in the background by Cassandre. Class starts, we start analyzing the poem, we look at cognates, and then I draw their focus on these possessive determiners, my being mon, mes in French, and then we try to translate together, j'écris ton nom, I write your name. And then we come back together. I showed him how to write a prompt. Let's explore this grammar concept with the chatbot by asking, why is your name translated as ton nom in French? And chatbots do a pretty good job at this. It explains that it can be mon mamé, ton tâté for your in French, depending on the gender and number of the noun. It modifies. And then we would go on to maybe have them explore the first person singular, third person singular, maybe even the first person plural. And then we'd stop there. They would have a foundation of this grammar concept, and we would dive into some communicative activities to reinforce that knowledge. At home, students would now have a model on how to explore a grammar concept with a chatbot. And so as homework, they would follow a scaffolded worksheet or a Canvas assignment to get them to discern all the intricacies of the concept. Think of all the exceptions to the rules, right? This would be a strategic use of at-home time. And I could also even have a little follow-up activity. What did you think about using the chatbot? How did it help you? Something, just a self-reflection. For example, students could ask, why is mon ami? Why is it mon ami in French? So we used a masculine singular determiner for a feminine singular noun. So this is one of these exceptions. This is a pretty innovative activity, again, for my own teaching circumstances, because I'm being very strategic with my at-home versus in-class use of time. They now have a model to explore a grammar concept outside of class time. It's also used as an intellectual exercise, so there's not watching passively a video over possessive determiners, but instead they're exploring the concept with that chatbot. And of course, we're going from the inductive to the deductive. This could be part of the follow-up activity, maybe a Canvas discussion board as well. Tease out the rules, apply it. My second example of AI usage in a student activity is going to be a comprehension checker or a question generator. So the objective is threefold here. We're going to have students reflect on their learning to identify their shortcomings. Students are going to learn how to write a prompt, and then students are going to use that chatbot to help them study or revise. So let's say we have 10 minutes left in class. We just wrapped up the chapter. I would pull up the learning objectives for that chapter and have students identify their shortcomings. What learning objective do they not feel comfortable with? Then we would create a prompt together to ask the chatbot to help them practice further reinforcing that learning objective. So for example, I just learned possessive determiners in French class. Can you create a family tree and create sentences in which I need to use these possessive determiners in French to describe the family? And we would stop there. The prompt is created. They have that tool. As homework, they would plug this into the chatbot and practice this French with the chatbot as a part of the revision cycle. They would also have a follow-up activity, self-reflection, a self-assessment, to analyze their understanding of the concept. Do they now feel more comfortable with that learning objective? Chatbots do a pretty good job with these types of prompts. So here it is. It created a little family tree, very simple family tree. It explains a family tree in English, and then it creates those plug-in mechanical drill activities that the student asked. Again, it's very accurate. It asks the students if they want to be walked through the answers, and it's pretty didactic in general. So again, here at home, I can offer personalized learning and corrective feedback, which is something I can't do otherwise. And again, we're allowing for that self-reflection and self-assessment, which are crucial in the learning cycle, of course, with a follow-up activity post-chatbot usage. My third example is similar. It's going to be using the chatbot as a written conversation partner. So again, here, we're at the end of the chapter. I pull up our learning objectives. I have student Students identified their shortcomings. Maybe this was a chapter where most of my learning objectives are communicative based, right? And so we're going to be at the paragraph level. We're going to be at the dialogue, in the dialogue domain. And so again, I would walk through students how to write an effective prompt to use the chatbot as a conversation partner. For example, I just learned salutations and presentation vocabulary in French class. Can you discuss with me in French to practice this vocabulary? We'd stop there. That's the end of class. And as homework, they would plug this in. And again, we'd have a self-reflection afterwards, such as what errors did you make? How do you now feel about that learning objective, etc. Chatbots do a great job at this. I'd love to have a little conversation with you. Hello, what is your name? My name is Morgan. It doesn't tell me its name, but we know who it is. Are you a student or a professor? Where do you live, etc. Again, pretty innovative because I can offer personalized learning, corrective feedback at home. It allows for self-reflection and self-assessment, and it can be extremely experimental here. For those students who do learn beyond the scope of your class, this is where you can encourage them to incorporate expressions, vocabulary that they've learned maybe on Duolingo or watching their favorite series, and they can play around with the language here. You would have to instruct them, right, so they know this is a space where they can do that in, but it can be a great outlet. Now, notice that I specified a written conversation partner because using a chatbot as an oral conversation partner, meaning that I'm having a live discussion with it spoken, in my experience, the technology is not there yet. I've tried several times these last 6 months, and every time it's been a letdown. If you don't start out with very precise and correct pronunciation, it has trouble understanding you. It does not correct pronunciation, which would be one of the main advantages. In addition to that, there are some serious lagging issues. So sometimes 15 seconds between what I said and its response. So it's just, we're not there yet. I'll keep checking, but not for now. My fourth example of using AI in student activities is using it as a teaching assistant or a tutor bot. And this is where UT Sage comes into play. So again, UT Sage, is a tutor bot that you as faculty or staff will create, train on a specific topic, and assign to your students. And so you click on Create, write in the topic of your lesson or your chapter, but the more precise the better, so it could be a lesson. You describe who your students are. You describe your outcomes. And again, here, the more precise, the better. You can explain common misconceptions, maybe if it's about a grammar concept. You can suggest conversation starters, so when your students log into this chatbot, they don't even have to prompt the chatbot. There are some ready-made activities for them to click on. And this is where the magic happens. You can upload class notes, your slides, even your textbook chapter if you want. And so that means that when your students are interacting with this bot, the bot is going to prioritize the materials that you've uploaded. In language teaching and learning, this is great because we can control the vocabulary and grammar being used with students. And when students use Copilot, for example, it might use advanced grammar or vocab that they haven't studied yet. So we're really able to focus in here on what we're targeting. It's very simple to share. You just use that little toggle. You can link it directly to Canvas. And so at the end of your chapter module in Canvas, it could be a little link. Tutor bots for partitive determiners. If you're having issues, click on that, have a little conversation with the tutor bot, do a couple of activities with it, and maybe you can follow up with a Canvas discussion board, and that can be extra credit. If your students use the tutor bot, you can offer that as extra credit. And soon, I believe they're rolling this out later this fall, we'll be able to see the analytics. So how many of our students are using it, for how long, etc. It does a great job. It's really well programmed. It was developed here at UT. So if you ask it a questions like, explain to me the usage of partitive determiners in the sentence, it's not just going to give you an answer. Instead, in this case, it throws the question back at me. When do you think we use these partitives, right? And so it's very didactic, and it was programmed that way. And so it's a wonderful tool that just rolled out and that we'll be piloting here in the lower divisions in French in spring. Again, innovative. I'm at home offering personalized learning and corrective feedback. It can be extremely intentional if you're very precise with your learning outcomes, which is an advantage. And of course, it allows for that self-reflection and self-assessment as long as you have that follow-up activity later on. All right, and then the last activity I have for you is using AI as an interpretation enhancer or an image generator. So this was an activity that I piloted at a previous institution. It was an upper level literature class. And the objective here is to have students think through their interpretation of a text, asking the chatbot to visually represent their understanding of that text. So here's the scene. In class, we read a poem together. We're going to focus on one specific line. And I'm going to ask students to sit with this line, think through their interpretation. In the target language, write instructions for the chatbot to generate an image of their understanding of that line. And in this particular class, we were reading the poem Dito by René Depestre, Haitian writer. And I chose this line. I purposely chose it because it's got a lot of images. It can be interpreted in many different ways. We're talking about birds, meridian, clemency, caravan. So it could go in any number of directions with it. And here are 4 of the images that my students generated. Voilà. Vastly different. And so I pulled all of them up. And we had a discussion about interpretation. Someone said they took into account the author's intention because they knew the poem was about his wife. Others focused on the literal meanings of the word. Others focused on the figurative meaning of the words. We talked about tone. Some saw the line as uplifting, some saw it as depressing. And so we were able to have that discussion really, and it allowed them for self-expression in general. In addition to that, it really forced them to think through their interpretation, because I had a student tell me they needed to recreate 2 images. Because the first one that they got back from the chatbot was not a good representation of their understanding. And so the student realized it was their instructions to the chatbot were not as clear as they should have been. And so effectively, the student created a language feedback loop, right? So it was just a really unique experiment that I've done since then as well, and in general, is quite innovative. So there are 5 examples of student activities. Let me check the time. Wait, okay. I just want to note that these, again, are activities that I piloted at a previous institution, and some will be piloted here in the French lower division classes in spring. Now, let's look at using AI in teaching, on the teaching side, on the instructor side. So again, we're going to go back to the DH framework and apply that DH framework to teaching. So that means that innovation is enhancing teaching, not replacing it. It also means that we as instructors are going to be actively engaged with whatever's being AI generated. So that means checking for level appropriateness, editing for accuracy, even relevance. And we want to make sure that we're using it productively, right? We want to save time, we want to save effort, and so we can target those menial and time-consuming tasks. Those are the ones that we can outsource. All right, so I've got 4 examples here for you on the instructor side. First is enhancing accessibility across the board, starting with these live captions. This is a little checkbox in PowerPoint. It's AI generated. It works pretty well. I can't move too far from the podium, but otherwise it works pretty well. In addition to that, if you're someone who teaches with a lot of videos on Canvas, you can have those videos AI transcribed in English and other languages. So for example, this summer I taught an asynchronous online class. I published a lot of videos to have a presence for my students on Canvas since I never really met them in person. And when you record through Zoom, Zoom, under the recording tab, automatically generates a transcription of your video in English and other languages as well. So you can just go there, copy and paste, and give those transcriptions to your students on Canvas. I forgot one week, I had 3 students email me, hey, can we have the transcriptions? I hadn't realized students were using it, but this is generally an easy way to enhance accessibility. We're supporting universal design. You do have to spot check for accuracy, but it can save you a lot of time, a lot of energy. I can't imagine transcribing all those videos this summer. No way. Too much. In addition to that, finding authentic materials is a great use of AI. So the poem I mentioned earlier by Paul Éluard, Liberté, I found it with AI. I asked it, what's a poem in French which uses possessive determiners? I read it, I make sure that it's level appropriate, that it's relevant for what I'm teaching. Took me a minute, and I found that authentic document. So it allows me to stay in the target language. It supports in-context learning. Again, you check for relevancy, but it can save you a lot of time, a lot of energy, especially if you're working with OER and you don't have a textbook to rely on. All right, creating materials is probably one of the main ways to use AI, starting with generating recordings. So let's say you're at the end of a chapter, you realize that your students haven't had enough listening practice. You just want like a 15-minute recording targeting specific words or maybe a verb tense. So I've been using Nairkeet with quite some success for a while. This is a free online, no account required website. You just type in a little script, choose your language, choose even your accent. It doesn't do a great job, but it's something. And it generates an MP3 file for you. And in a pinch, if you need that listening activity, it's a great resource. Would I do this for a phonetics class, a pronunciation class? No, not at all. But for first semester language class, it's a great resource. Brainstorming activities is another great AI usage. Sometimes I'm just feeling uninspired. It's the end of the day when I'm lesson planning. I don't know how I can engage my students, so I asked the AI, what are some fun vocabulary games that I can do with my students? It curates a little list of 10 activities. Taboo. Yes, of course, we can practice circumlocution. And so I get out of a rut sometimes in lesson planning just by brainstorming with AI. Creating little handouts, comprehension questions is a great way to use AI as well. Again, edit for level appropriateness and accuracy. So the 4th question here that it generated for me, it uses subject-verb inversion to form the question. My students haven't learned that yet, so I just edit it out. But otherwise, creating a little comprehension quiz like that, it's a great use. And finally, creating rubrics. Let's say you're doing a last-minute activity. You want a quick little rubric for an exam. It'll generate one. Obviously, the more precise you are in your prompts, the better it will be. But you nevertheless want to edit it to make sure that it targets your needs and your learning objectives. So in general, creating materials. We're supporting in-context learning, student engagement. We're staying in the target language as much as possible. You do have to edit for level appropriateness, check for accuracy and relevance, but it can save you a lot of time and effort. When you do use AI, you want to also make sure that you cite it in your teaching. Let students know that you found this poem with AI because we're reinforcing this AI literacy. We're being transparent with them, and we can have that 30-second discussion. I use AI to find this poem because I wanted to make sure we remain in the target language with in-context learning. So we can reinforce that cycle with them. Finally, the 4th and last example of using AI on the instructor side is for these teaching-related research talks and presentations, just like this one. So full disclosure, I used AI twice in this presentation. The first one to generate this visual, this image, just because I wanted a visual on that slide, on my 3rd slide. And I also asked it for help generating my bibliography. So as I was drafting this presentation, I had all the URLs to the articles I was reading. So I upload the PowerPoint to Copilot. I asked it to extract the sources, and it generated the MLA bibliography. It was not great. I had to edit it quite a bit. And if I had images of the book covers, it could not extract that. Nevertheless, it did save me a lot of time because I have about 3 slides of sources for you all. What is not up there on this list, however, is grading. And so this is a UT policy out of the security office, I believe, that we should not be using AI to grade, or that when it results in a student grade. I believe the logic is that we are the experts. We know how we've taught. We know what we've taught, and we also know our learning objectives. And so AI is not yet capable of taking all that into account and producing a fair and accurate grade. Not yet. But we should not be using AI here in any activity that results in a student grade. All right, I'm checking for time. All right, so now I'd like to share with you some recent research that's come out of AI in education and language teaching specifically. What we've been seeing these last 6 to 8 months is really a convergence of the research, which is great news. We're seeing that AI needs to be deliberately and consistently framed, and we're also seeing that AI needs to serve innovation and critical thinking. And I've been loving reading this research because in a way it parallels and confirms the DH framework that I've been using, so I'm going to keep on using it. And today I'm going to suggest 2 books if you're just getting started in AI and teaching. I'm going to suggest 2 books that are available through the UT library. They're online, so you have access to them now. The first book is Teaching with AI by Jose Bowen and C. Edward Watson. You've probably heard of it. Came out in spring 2024, and I had the pleasure of attending a 2-day workshop with Jose Bowen at my previous institution. And it's a great book to start with because the first couple of chapters explain the how of AI. So even if you're not tech savvy or tech oriented, they're pretty accessible chapters which explain, what does computational thinking looks like. In addition to that, it does a great job at explaining that AI is great at divergent thinking. So AI is going to put 2 concepts that you and I wouldn't necessarily put together. It's going to put them together to generate new, interesting ideas, and it can do that on a large scale. And so then we can take those ideas and adapt them and critically analyze them for our own use. In other words, for language teaching, this means that we should be using AI as an intellectual exercise. We should not be having it used by students to come up with a single right or wrong answer. That's not a good use. If you want to use Bloom's taxonomy, right, this hierarchy of learning objectives, you want to make sure that you're aiming for those higher thinking order levels. Not all of your AI activities have to target those, but ideally they should, like creation, like that image generation that we did. The second book I suggest is Rethinking Language Education in the Age of Generative AI. This just came out in May. In the introduction, the authors Tiang and Wang explained that developing frameworks and teaching AI literacy is crucial, not just for students, but also instructors. And so I employed the DH framework. They suggest another one. In their first chapter, they adapt the theories of Leo van Leer. And it's essentially a 5 ecosystem framework within which any integration of AI must be evaluated. So if the DH framework doesn't speak to you, I suggest reading this first chapter for another sort of a framework that you could deliberately and consistently apply. I'll also mention their 4th chapter, because we're starting to see more and more empirical studies come out, which is really interesting. So in this chapter, the authors analyzed authentic versus AI-generated text, and specifically they looked at learner engagement. And their conclusions are pretty fascinating. They explained that AI-generated texts were equally as engaging as authentic text. The authors do concede that AI is repetitive. It tends to summarize itself at the end of each paragraph. You probably noticed that. Nevertheless, AI did adhere to authentic linguistic structures, and they ultimately conclude that AI-generated text could supplement or even replace the need for textbooks, which would be pretty revolutionary in higher ed, but also I'm thinking in secondary education when textbooks are not existing, right? They're non-existent at this point. All right, so those are the two main suggestions I have for you. You can also look into specific journals, just because journals are on a faster publishing timeline, so a lot more are coming out here. Also looking at adjacent fields, such as the International Journal of Computer-Assisted Language Learning and Teaching. They've got some interesting articles. Language Learning and Technology, and of course, ACFL's peer-reviewed journal. And I'll mention also two other books. I haven't read them. They're on my reading list for this semester, but Generative AI Technologies, Multiliteracies, and Language Education looks interesting. And then finally, Artificial Intelligence, Real Teaching. This is for English language teaching, but I'm sure it could apply, of course, to all language teaching. And this is out of the University of Michigan. It just came out recently as well. All right, I now want to end this presentation by sharing with you some resources on how to teach AI literacy and then some professional development opportunities here at UT. So the what, how, and why, this is really going to be the application of your DH framework. What does innovation look like to you? In which sort of activities do you want to assign AI, right? Environmental costs and the impacts, there are a lot of resources out there. It depends on what you want to focus on with your students. Now, to teach prompt writing, there's a lot out there. Just because prompt writing is not germane to education, in the medical field, in business, and law, they're all having to look at how to effectively write a prompt. So there's a lot of resources out there. I suggest assigning Chapter 3 from Teaching with AI, just because our students have access to it. But it also has a couple pages of prompt tips. For example, trying new combinations to unlock results, avoiding synonyms, being direct, avoiding negative commands as well. So your students could read those couple pages and draw up a little list that you could then use as a framework. How to teach limitations and bias. This is a key element as well. For here, you could come up with a little quick activity that's specific to your language maybe. My go-to is having students ask the chatbot to generate a banner image for our Canvas page, right? That little image at the top. And inevitably, this is the type of image that the chatbot creates, which is great for my purposes, of course. So we have, a 5-minute discussion as to why there's bias in this image. And of course, it's equating the French language with the country of France, with the Eiffel Tower and the flag. And so we have a larger discussion about what it means to be a French speaker in the world. This is only representative of 25% approximately of the French speakers in the world, etc. This is 2 minutes, but it gets them to critically think about what's being generated by AI, and then I'll apply that logic with other activities. So have you thought critically about what AI was saying to you? All right, finally, professional development opportunities. Well, you're already attending this one, so great, awesome. But you also want to be on the lookout for the Office of Enterprise Technology and Academic Technology. They have a lot of recorded workshops that you can access immediately, especially when it comes to Copilot. I highly suggest looking at the Center for Teaching and Learning's event. Next week, Gen Idea Workshop is happening with Matt Russell. I attended the September series of this, and I learned quite a bit. It's about course design, right, at the course level. So this is a great resource. I'll also mention the prompt design workshop, and this is online in a few weeks as well. In general, I highly suggest you play around with the CTL's website as well, because they've got links to the AI tools, syllabus policies, prompt design. So if you don't want to assign teaching with AI to teach prompt design, they have a lot of resources as well out of the University of Sydney. And then finally, under the assignments tab, they have 10, 15 examples of AI activities that you can do with students. And they also have a link to this book, which is a crowdsourced collection of 101 creative ideas to use AI in education. I've been reading it this week, and it's quite inspiring. All right, let's check the time. I believe we have a few minutes. What I'd like now for you to do is think through maybe how you could apply one of these in your teaching or in your students' learning, maybe talk to the person next to you just for 2 minutes really quickly and brainstorm with them, or maybe you've already been using AI. All right, I'll let you speak. All right, thank you very much. Hopefully we've got ideas floating around. I'll just share with you my bibliography, and I believe we have about 10 minutes for questions, comments. If you want to share your own ideas, there's so much out there. I'd be happy to. Yes.
All right, thank you so much, Morgane. Is this Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Morgane. I feel lucky that I can apply these specifically because of teaching lower division French. But what I'm wondering is, when you're like training a bot and interacting with them, and they're taking on your language, are you doing bilingual interaction with the bots, and are the students doing that? How do the language get separated? Do you personally have a just French bot you converse with and a just English, or how do you work with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. They can do both, right? So we want to be extremely explicit, of course. So for upper division class, there's no reason why they're not using that tutor bot, UT Sage, right? Because it's trained, they should be using that in the target language. Maybe in the lower divisions, sure, it can be trained in English. But otherwise, it might be up to the instructor and kind of what their learning objectives are in that class. Why not? Why not use the target language? We use it in class for instructions, so why not with the chatbot as well? I would then suggest using UT Sage specifically and not Copilot, just because Copilot can use a lot of terminology that's not level appropriate. But definitely for UT Sage, I think it's accessible for semester in French. Oui, absolument. You can train it to bypass that maybe language barrier, train it to explain through examples. That could be a way around that. Wait.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much. I found this so interesting, and so I am by no means an expert, but I found it all very digestible and applicable, and thank you. So I love the idea of leaving students with prompts at the end of class. I think that's great. I definitely want to incorporate that. I'm really interested in this module, like an AI literacy introduction module. So is that something that already exists that can be like shared with people in Canvas? I know you want a lot more things to do right now, personally, because you have nothing on your plate. Like, would that be easy to make, and it could be generic even, you know, not domain or subject specific? Because I would love to have that, because we know they're all using it, but we don't know if they're not at the same level, and it would really like level the playing field, the discussion field for it. And so does that exist?
That does not exist. Admittedly, I just created my own just because I started out 2 years ago, so I kind of knew.
Can you share it?
I can, absolutely.
That would be amazing, I think.
Yeah, I could send it to Pauda and to be distributed. It also it will be instructor or class dependent, just because that first, the when, how, and why will depend on your teaching circumstances in your class.
But just the framework that you gave here, if like each of those bullet points could have references, resources, et cetera, or like fill in your XYZ here, I think that would be such a great resource. Thank you. Merci.
Absolutely. Some universities are starting to, I think was University of Maryland, assigning AI, a 1-credit AI literacy course over summer to all their students. So there's a push to level the playing field, like you said. I'm not sure if UT has anything on the books like that, but it'd be interesting to offer that to all. Maybe if we're teaching a language class with multiple sections, right? Make sure that everyone has access to that that would probably help.
I love getting out in front of it too, instead of it being like this dark thing that we all use but nobody wants to admit to using, et cetera, et cetera. And then we don't want our students to use it, but it would put that on the kind of a all on the same page as well.
Absolutely. Should I?
So just to follow up on what Morgane was saying about resources at UT, the university has also set up a program. It's called AI Champions. You're going to be hearing more about that over the next several weeks and months. These are people who are AI aficionados like myself, who are being trained to help with accessibility in terms of AI to faculty and staff. And then the second thing is I have an affinity group that I've started. Nick is a member, Vivian's a member, and now Laura's a member. And we meet once a month to talk specifically about AI and languages in terms of instruction as well as research. So we're at the intersection of second language acquisition, pedagogy, and technology. So if you're interested in joining us, our next meeting is October 21st at 4 o'clock.
There we go, October 21st, yeah. Just to follow up here, yes, there's so much happening. So that literacy module, UT might come out with one. Also, UT Champions as well, yes. And I'll draw your attention to the Enterprise Technology Office has an AI roadmap. This is their just fall schedule. They're rolling out a lot of new programs. The UT Spark is getting a makeover. AI Gateway, I'm not sure what that is, but that'll be deployed soon. UT Spark Dining, I'm assuming that's for students. So there's a lot happening out there. It's all about, at this point, going to those professional development opportunities, joining those affinity groups, and amassing that knowledge that then you can kind of use and adapt to your own teaching circumstances. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.